Next up, we have 1.16, Blueprint for Maryland's Future. This is information discussion.
So good afternoon, President Johnson, Vice President Rose, and Dr. Dyson and board members. My colleague, Leslie Pellegrino, who's our Chief Financial Officer, and I are bringing you some updates on the blueprint in two parts. So we'll bring you part one right now in the work session to just sort of get you anchored to and understand some of the overview of where we are in the work. And then the 6 p.m. open meeting, we're going to have a more robust presentation inclusive of all of the steering committee co-chairs to go in detail about what work we've accomplished and what is ahead of us. So I look forward to walking you through this today.
This is the appetizer.
Huh?
Appetizer right now.
So for those of you listening or our community members or public, if you're not familiar, the Blueprint for Maryland's Future is a body of work that was driven from some legislation and is about transforming the educational experience across the state of Maryland. And it looks at not everything that we do, but 5 key pillars that is believed to be the levers that will improve the outcomes for our students and for our employees. So our hope today in our session is to give you a little bit about the history of the Blueprint. It's important to understand the origin of the law, how it's changed over time. We're going to give you a snapshot of the 5 pillars so you understand how the work is organized. Talk to you about the timeline, which is always hanging around and looking at places where we need to meet deadlines, and talked about the funding implications. What money do we get? How are we expected to use it? And what this means for our work. And of course, we'll answer your questions as we go. So just in terms of how we've organized this work, while often you might see or hear Mrs. Pellegrino and I talking to you about the Blueprint, we stand on the shoulders of a huge group of talented staff who are really owning this work, who are subject matter experts, both as their experience drives, but also in the areas that they have defined themselves as experts because of the work that they do and the study they've given to this work. So Leslie and I are supported by Heather Claybaugh, who's our budget director, and Dr. Eric Lors-Phillips, who is our director of public affairs. As we sort of, the 4 of us, keep the ship moving, and I serve as the overall implementation coordinator for the district. And we have 5 subcommittees, and you'll meet all of those co-chairs in the 6 p.m. session. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Pellegrino, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the history of the Blueprint.
Good afternoon. The history of the Blueprint legislation actually came from recommendations from the Kirwan Commission, or the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education, which was established back in 2016 and met for 3 years. I had the honor to be on that commission as a representative of Maryland's ASBO, or Association of School Business Officials. Frederick was well served on that committee because also Joyce Schaefer, our board member, served for the Maryland Association of Board of Ed. So we had 2 representatives of 25 on the Kirwan Commission. So from those recommendations was established the legislation. And as you can see here on the slide, it's been legislation established for the last 4 legislative sessions. And so we like to talk about the 2019 legislation as kind of like the little Kirwan. That was just getting us started. That was some of the funding and just getting us into some of the concepts and whatnot. The big legislation was the 2020 session, which was House Bill 1300, and that was the biggest component. And that really established the funding formulas. That also established all of the recommendations and requirements and everything. But as we all know, at the end of that session, or right at the end of that session, is when the pandemic struck. We also, this legislation was vetoed by the governor that year. And so it was not until January of 2021 that we actually had this legislation overridden and became law. Well, what that did was that legislation was written for that year to go into effect, and since it was delayed almost 8 months, they had to have yet more legislation. So that was HB 1372. And then since in the last session, we had yet another one that fine-tuned some details. That was a much smaller change back in the last legislative session. So I'm sure it will be a big topic again in this legislative session. We may see yet some more fine-tuning to it. I do not anticipate there would be significant changes, though, to the Blueprint legislation. As we mentioned earlier, the goals of the Blueprint really is to transform Maryland's early childhood, primary, and secondary education system to the levels of high-performing systems through the world, not just in the United States. When the Kerwin Commission met and all the discussions, it had to do with how could we look at other systems all over the world and what are their best practices. And so that's how the evolution of the goals are there. Part of also the goal was to establish a career ladder for our educators. As we all know, we're struggling throughout the nation to attract, retain educators. So how can this legislation, what the Maryland legislators want to do to encourage people to go into the teaching profession and to help us fill our positions and support our students?
So I'm going to walk you through just a brief overview of the pillars. Each of the subcommittees are going to go in depth with these pillars this evening. And so with brevity in the interest of time, I'm not going to go into great detail right now, so we'll come back in open session. But it's important to understand there are 5 pillars. Now, with the work of our local school system, we really focus on the 1 through 4. The governance and accountability pillar is very much about the reporting requirements. It's sort of, they tell us what we have to tell them, and we produce those reports. The actual transformational work lives inside of pillars 1 through 4. I'll walk you through the first 2 pillars in brief. The first pillar is around early childhood education. If I was to sort of punctuate this with the most important thing to know, this is really about the expansion of full-day pre-K for all 3- and 4-year-olds. And so when you start to think about, well, what's in the blueprint, that full-day pre-K experience is one of the primary purposes of that pillar. And of course, we'll talk with you this evening about some of the implementation successes we've had, but also some of the barriers that we face, along with many local education agencies across the state with facilities and some of those things. So talk to you about that one later this evening. The second pillar is on high quality and diverse teachers and leaders. And if I was to share with you the most important thing to know about this pillar, this is really about the career ladder, how we incentivize and financially reward teachers who stay in the classroom while acknowledging the many years of experience and skills they bring. And so that's one of the biggest bodies of work that we're currently working on. Pillar 3 and 4 are around college and career readiness and more resources for students to be successful. In Frederick County Public Schools, we've actually divided Pillar 3 into 2 subcommittees because there's 2 really big bodies of work. One is around college and career readiness that has to do with dual enrollment, early college, some of those access points. And the second part has to do with CTE, 2 huge bodies of work that we are driven to expand and excited about expanding. And those are the 2 big rocks from that particular pillar. And the 4th pillar is more resources for students to be successful. This is actually an area that I would say is already a strength in Frederick County Public Schools, and when the co-chairs talk with you about it, this work is around our community schools and how we have wraparound services in most of our impacted communities to serve children and families end to end. So those are the big rocks of those pillars. And again, around governance and accountability, this is just the work that Leslie and I, along with the team, do to make sure all of our reports are done, all of the data that they ask for is provided clearly and accurately, and that the funding and the money that we receive is spent in the way that the legislation requires. So Leslie, I'll turn it over to you.
One of the big parts of the Maryland Blueprint for Education has to do with accountability. And this is a little different. And if we ever have a history lesson, back there used to be a Thornton Commission in the early 2000s that established our funding formulas as we know of them and previously. And part of that Thornton Commission said that we would relook at our funding formulas. But when we relooked at the funding formulas, it wasn't just about the funding formulas. It was about the whole education system. And that's what the Kerwin Commission did. And in that discussion, there became the discussion about accountability. How do we make sure that these recommendations are implemented with fidelity and on time? And so that was the establishment of what they call the AIB board, or the Accountability and Implementation Board. And this board, and it's a temporary board, so it does sunset at the end of the implementation, which is approximately 2033. And they're the governing board. There's 7 members on that board, and they will be the ones that help us. They've created the framework for our implementation plans. They'll be the ones that will evaluate, along with MSDE, our plans. And they also are the ones that have the hammer if we do not do what we're supposed to be doing. They have the authority to withhold funds if we do not do the process or the plan that we plan to put in place. So there's a lot of power in that organization. There's also a lot of conversation as to where do they fit with MSDE. The law says that they have the ultimate authority for this implementation. So it has been interesting. Luckily, they're working very well right now with MSDE on helping us and give the LEAs, the local education agencies, the information we need to do to put together our implementation plans. So let's talk about funding. There's a lot in the blueprint, and it is going to be very expensive. And so the recommendation, or the estimate, I should say, not recommendation, the estimate of the cost of the blueprint is about $3.8 billion over the 10-year period of time. That's both from an increase in state funding and an increase in your local funding. And that's above and beyond what the current formulas would have been giving the LEAs. Our funding formulas came into effect this fiscal year in full, so that's where we saw some increases this year, and that helped us balance our budget and start implementing pieces of our blueprint this year. There's all sorts of different pieces of the funding formula. Several of them are newer. There is now an allocation for pre-K, whereas previously there was not. There's also an allocation for what we call our teacher salary, or a national board certification. You'll hear more about that tonight. There's also the concentration of poverty, which is our community schools, and there's also transitional supplemental instruction. All the other ones listed here were current formulas. They have been revised and updated, but they were formulas that were existing prior to the Kerwin recommendations in the blueprint legislation. Our local funding, our accounting funding requirements, most of these formulas that I mentioned on the previous slide have a local component to them. So the local governments now have to give us a funding piece for each of those formulas, except for items like community schools, because they go 100% to an individual school, and the locals do not give us funding for that. But these local requirements are to help assist and make sure that these plans can be implemented. Our 2024 maintenance of effort, which is where you've got to fund, the local government has to fund you at the same level per student as you've done the previous year, was adjusted for the 2013, what they call the hold harmless, which was about a $9 million adjustment. So you'll see when we released the superintendent's recommended budget that our actual maintenance requirement for next year is actually very small. Now, that's a minimum requirement, and that will, of course, depend upon our local government as to what they finally give us for allocations. By formula, Frederick County, and by the estimates of the Department of Legislative Services, there does not seem to be a need. So if you ever are at state meetings and you see big zeros going across for Frederick County with the required amount for local funding, that's true from those basic formula calculations by the Department of Legislative Services. It was done back in 2019. You've got to understand, Frederick County is changing dramatically. We're growing dramatically, so those zeros will not be zeros as we go forth. And last but not least, I'd like to talk, well, not last but not least, but this next slide, I want to talk about a concept you're going to hear a lot of, about the funding following the students. With the back in the Thornton days when we got funding, we basically got lump sum money. So you got kind of block funded money, you got foundation money, and each school system then could spend that money how they chose. But what the blueprint legislation says is this money should really be following the students. So if you get EL students, it should be going to schools with your EL populations. If you've got special education students, it needs to be going to those schools also. So they want to make sure that that money is funneling down to the schools. And what that is requiring, there's a requirement that 75% of our per pupil funding, our state and local monies, go down to the school level. That's not something we've been used to. And I'll give you an example, dual enrollment. When we have a student for dual enrollment, we pay the school, we pay FCC, and that goes to one account. It's easy to account for anyone who's accountants. It's easy to account for, hit one account. But now what we have to do is track that by each of the students, by each of the home schools they came from, and now charge that. So what that means is we've got new approaches to how we're tracking stuff. We're going to have to budget differently, and it's going to really make us think differently as we get into budgeting. So last but not least, in this summary, our blueprint legislation and our new funding formulas will definitely add additional funding for Frederick County Public Schools. We will continue to grow. With our growth, we will continue to see growth in both our state and our local funding. We will also, the continuation of funding above maintenance of effort is going to be critical for Frederick County Public Schools to implement all the things we need to do for the blueprint. And also to implement all the different programs that we want to expand here at Frederick County Public Schools. So this is a critical thing for us as we move forward to have funding above our maintenance of effort.
So in closing for our work session presentation today, there are a couple of links here. We do have, there's some from the state, from our local. We've been continuing to work on a campaign. You'll hear more about our public affairs campaign to get information out around the work that we're doing this evening. These resources are here for you. But our hope in this part one of our presentation was just to give you an anchor for the body of work, the significant work around funding. I'm so glad to have Ms. Pellegrino as a partner. Because obviously she's very well versed in how that works and is going to ensure that we are well resourced in order to meet all of the goals of the blueprint together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. We'll open up the floor. I will remind my colleagues that it's 4:03 and we still have closed session to do. So and we have more items. So,
Be brief.
okay. Thank you.
So,
Good job, Brad.
thank you, Red, for your presentation. Thank you, sir, for presenting. Just quick questions here. Let's see, first one. So you mentioned about the blueprint funding. So just for my colleagues and everybody in the room and listening, this is state law. So this has to happen. So you mentioned about needing that funding from the county. They're basically required to give it to us, though, right?
They're required, but the calculation currently shows that they're already giving us above what is required. So
Okay.
as we calculate and look ahead, if our students had stayed the same, if we didn't have growth, technically they would not have to give us any additional funding. Of
Okay.
course, we're growing, so that helps us from that perspective, I guess you could say. It also comes with added expenses. But so no, right now, the way Frederick is setting,
Okay.
our county government is funding us above what is the minimum requirement.
Gotcha. So we can just ask, but they don't have to. Okay.
That is correct.
So we have to have, okay.
But we all know that that's going to be critical. And this
Yeah.
year, particularly as we move forward with inflation and whatnot, it's going to be critical that we get additional funding.
Okay, so we need their support. Out of curiosity, this may have come up, Mr. Bass, and as an email passed around, I didn't get to open it, so I apologize if it was already answered. But with the discussion about national board certification with counselors and versus teachers, was that in the new legislation, was that kind of answered?
Not clearly.
Okay.
There was some ambiguity with what was the definition of a teacher.
Okay.
And so we're still working out some of those
Still
details with the
undefined.
state. And actually, as of last Thursday or Friday, we were still emailing back and forth with the state on determining exactly who qualifies for the NBC additional salary enhancement.
Okay.
And when the co-chairs get up here this evening for Pillar 2, they can talk more about what that NBC salary enhancement, it's not a stipend, salary enhancement curtails and what it includes and how we're working through that.
But it's important to know that the NBC is, again, an example of that shared funding. And so we negotiate with our teachers union, so the funding is listed in there as an article. And so we match with MSDE, over time. It started at everybody who is NBC in our negotiated agreement gets a portion of funding. But if they meet the blueprint definition of a teacher, they get additional funding from MSDE. So it's not every national board certified teacher that gets the matching from MSDE. It's only those who meet the definition of a teacher, which according to the blueprint law has to do with the percent of time you are teaching.
Okay.
Okay?
And then my last question is for information. You mentioned the AIB, that board have that, they're small tenure, but they have a great amount of accountability and power with this blueprint and how they're working with MSDE. Hopefully it stays amicable, but where are they housed?
Oh, I think right now, I do not believe they have offices. From all the meetings we view, I know their executive director, she is at her home when she is there. So I do not believe they have offices at this point in time.
It's like,
I don't think so.
Okay.
meetings are-
Just curious about that relationship. If they're actually at MSD, they could probably maybe work a little amicably.
No, they're not.
No,
They're kind of
Definitely
like
not the
nebulous
MSD.
right now. Okay, thank you.
And I will mention that Ike Leggett, who used to be a county executive for Montgomery County, is the chairman of that committee, and also Britt Kerwin, Dr. Kerwin, who was, of course, the chairman for the Kerwin Commission, is also on the AIB board along with other folks that have been.
Rachel Heiss from
And Rachel
Legislative
Heiss
Service
is the executive director. Rachel was very instrumental in the blueprint legislation as the DLS, or the Department of Legislative Services representative during the Kerwin years.
Mr. Bass?
One question from me now. With this 75% of per student formula funding following the student, are you able to evaluate how much is currently following the student to their particular school, either now or in a follow-up with the board?
Yes, some of our expenses are already coded down to what we call the school level. So in other words, salaries. When we pay for an individual teacher, their salary is coded to their location code of that school. And I will tell you, since about 85, 87% of our salary is, of our budget is salary and fringes, we think we should be able to get to that 75% fairly easily. But we're still working through how that works. Heather and Melissa in my office are breaking those pieces down. But yeah, I would say the majority, we can get almost to the 75%.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and if there ends up being any additional information on it, I'm very interested in this piece, particularly. Yeah, I don't know, when you're speaking about, right, that if there's specific funding around English learners, and that in the past that could go just to the whole district, and that this needs to, going forward, be specific to the student. Yeah, I'm very interested in this piece, so I guess, as there is information on this, yeah, please do share with the board.
Will do.
Thank you.
Any other burning questions?
We'll be back with you
my
this
subtle
evening, so
hint.
you can
Yes.
ask us then.
Yes.
Thank
Thank you very much.
Thank you
I do
all.
have to say thank you, Ms. Pellegrino, for being on our team.
Yes.
We're
thank
so
you.
lucky you're with FCPS, and you as well, Dr. Sergo. But Leslie just has a grip on all the numbers. Okay, next up, we have 5.02, Blueprint for Maryland's Future. This is information
Okay.
and discussion, and too many names to list on the.
Don't you,
presenters.
yeah, thank you for that. We're back from, if you're just tuning in, we're trying to present this in two parts, and sort of just to give you a sense of the magnitude of the work. The blueprint legislation itself is over 230 pages. The template that we need to complete and turn into the state is 100 pages without us adding anything. That's just 100 pages of questions and prompts and data tables. So the magnitude of the work is significant. And so we came to the work session earlier to sort of talk about some of the backdrop and the framework of the blueprint with regards to funding. And we're back today, and I have the pleasure of being joined by our steering committee. And so just a sense of the organization, we're going to have an opportunity for each of the pillars, have co-chairs, either 2 or in some cases 3 members. There are 12 members who join the steering committee and help lead this work, and you'll have an opportunity to hear about the work they're leading and, of course, ask them any questions around that particular pillar. So we're going to get started. If you were not able to watch the work session today, just a reminder, we're not going to go over the history of the blueprint in the interest of time, but for those of you who are just joining us, these are some of the things that we're hoping to share with the public and the community and the board today. As I shared, I'm Sarah Sergo. I'm the Chief of Staff, but I'm also the Implementation Coordinator for the district. I share that work with Leslie Pellegrino, who is our Chief Financial Officer, as well as Heather Claybaugh, our Budget Director, and Dr. Eric Lors-Phillips, who is also here, who is our Executive Director of Public Affairs. We've got all aspects of the work covered, and we work really productively in service of executing the blueprint. We have 5 subcommittees, and so just as you see here, we focus our subcommittees on 4 of the pillars. So bullets 3 and 4 are 2 aspects of pillar 3. So we have a 3A and a 3B. And then the 5th bullet is actually pillar 4. The 5th pillar in the legislation, which is about governance and accountability, we don't have a steering committee working on because it's really more of a perfunctory part of the legislation in terms of reporting. So I'll turn it over to my partner, Ms. Pellegrino.
As we mentioned this afternoon, the goals of the blueprint are twofold. The first is wanting to transform Maryland's education system so that we are one of the best educational systems in the world, not just in the nation, but in the world. We also are looking to establish career ladders and pay structures that allow us to attract and retain our teaching force. As we all know, this is a national problem we have, and this legislation is going to hopefully help us address this and encourage students to go into teaching, and those students then when they graduate come work for us here at FCPS. So those are the main two goals of this legislation.
So as we get into the work today, and I'm going to ask the first two folks who are leading the early childhood education pillar, I'm going to remain up here as a PowerPoint Vanna, and so I'll keep things moving as we go along. But just as a reminder, there are over 72 individuals who are part of this work for the Blueprint. That is not including the steering committee. So we're talking about over 100 individuals, principals, teachers, community members, our college partners. This is a cross-organizational effort, and it is well represented from all aspects of our employees and from our Frederick County partners. So I'd like to turn it first over to our co-chairs for Pillar 1.
So my name is Kevin Cuppett. I'm the Executive Director for Curriculum Instruction and Innovation here in Frederick County, and I have the pleasure of co-chairing with Leslie Fry, who is the Supervisor of Early Childhood Education. This particular pillar, we have reached out, as you can see, can you go back one slide, Barry, to the number of stakeholders. We have a lot of relationships across the early childhood landscape, and they've been great participants in this work. Next slide, please. There's a lot going on in each of these little boxes, and one of the reasons that early childhood education is as active as it is because the work for this began in 2016. That was when we did our, well, I don't want to steal your slide, but that was when our initial work started, and unlike the other pillars, this work began before the Kerwin Commission was even developed. And so the Kerwin Commission and the Blueprint solidified the direction of this work. And in addition, this pillar received a significant amount of money over the last, especially the last 4 years. So you're going to see the fruits of that labor and the fact that the money's been present there. So we're going to go through each of these boxes. I'm going to turn this over to Leslie.
Thank you. Good evening. So I'm going to provide just a tiny bit of background on our phased-in enrollment process. As Dr. Cuppett said, in 2016, we opened our first full-day pre-K program in Frederick County Public Schools. This year, we have 49 full-day classrooms across the county. We do have 3 specialized pre-K programs as well that are full-day. So we're excited about that work. It just kind of continues for us now. We kind of know the process of how to expand those programs. Readiness data demonstrates increased student achievement for children that attend full-day programming, especially compared to their peers that aren't able to access that. And then we currently have really limited space and 3-year-old programming. So part of Blueprint says full-day programming for 3 and 4-year-olds. So talk a little bit in a couple boxes here about how we plan to hopefully address that. Another component of the pillar is the administration of the Kindergarten Readiness Assessment, or KRA. Since 2014, FCPS has been participating in the Kindergarten Readiness Assessment. This past fall, by October 10th, 99% of our kindergartners completed the Kindergarten Readiness Assessment. Early childhood stakeholders in Frederick County and across the state really depend on this data to drive their programming.
So the next box, changing enrollment criteria. As Leslie mentioned, the Blueprint is designed to transform education, and this is one way that that's happening. Originally, pre-K eligibility was for families who had incomes 0 through 185% of the federal poverty line. That has now been increased to 300% above the federal poverty line. So you can see there's a lot more students who are now income eligible. And down the road is going to be also the prioritization of any student with an IEP or who is an English learner. And so the constituents who are going to be eligible automatically for pre-K is growing very rapidly, which is why we're trying to keep pace with the demand. So this does, next one is the impact. Okay, so you heard Leslie say we don't have a lot of space. You have to remember that the vast majority of our elementary schools, when they were designed and built, kindergarten was half day. And so we've expanded that, and so when you go from half-day programming, you're going to have to double the space that you need for those students, and that's now happening in our pre-K. We've been able to get up to these 49 different sessions. that we have, and we're working with Mr. Lebo and Dr. Alavito and others to find creative uses for creative space for this. One of those, by the way, was that we have now been placing pre-Ks in 2 of our high schools, Frederick High and Tuscarora High School, where an early childhood education teacher and an assistant operate that classroom. And at the same time, in career and technology education, our CDA, Child Development Associates program, has students go over and work with those students. And that's supervised by a career. And we went and visited a program in Washington County. It's been fantastic, and we're looking to expand that. And what's great is we can start building a pipeline of students who come out of here who are eligible to be pre-K assistants, which I think Leslie's going to touch on.
If you ever get getting a chance to stop by one of those classrooms, it really is fascinating. The teachers teaching those pre-K classes they love the concept of having those older kids come in and support, and they really are getting the pre-K experience as they're considering becoming an educator. So it really, it's a beautiful experience if you get to get out and see. So another important factor, this pillar, is the availability of participating private pre-K providers. So part of the blueprint design is to provide pre-K slots using public school and private centers through a mixed delivery system in order for all of these eligible children to have the opportunity of full-day pre-K. So as Dr. Cuppett said, blueprint authors knew that public schools would have limited space for expanding pre-K, and we know that the private childcare community is a vital part of our early childhood landscape. So the success of this piece of this pillar depends on private centers and providers participating in state-funded pre-K. This year in Frederick County, we have one local childcare center, the Learning Bee. It's in Walkersville, that has 20 slots for 3- and 4-year-old children that are state-funded. We work with them. We have an active MOU. Through that MOU and our partnership, their teacher and staff that work in that classroom attend professional learning sessions with our pre-K staff and teachers that are developed by our ECE team. Another part of this pillar is the Child Development Associate Certificate for Pre-K Instructional Assistants. So Blueprint says that by the school year 2025-26, instructional assistants serving in full-day pre-K classrooms must have either a Child Development Associate's Certificate, which we call the CDA, an associate's degree, or higher education. We've worked with Frederick Community College to design a program for current employees to obtain their CDA. The Early Childhood Office is using grant funds to cover the cost of that course. We'll be communicating with impacted staff in the next few weeks. There will be an information session with FCC in January, and then that first cohort is slated to begin early this spring. And as Dr. Cuppett mentioned, this is that same certificate that many of our high schoolers will start to graduate with and immediately be employable as pre-K instructional assistants. So we're thrilled about that. All right, and last but never least, the final piece of this pillar in the blueprint is the addition of Judy Center programs. FCPS currently has 5 Judy Center early learning hubs at Waverly, Hillcrest, Lincoln, Butterfly Ridge, and Monocacy. Judy Centers offer educational and support services to any family living in a school catchment area, regardless of household income. Supports may include assistance with referrals for social services, parenting classes, infant and toddler playgroups, English classes, family engagement events. We now do fresh produce pickups from local farms in Frederick counties for our families, school readiness programs, and supports with pre-K and kindergarten enrollment. That's just naming a few of the services that we provide through our Judy Centers. FCPS will continue to write Judy Center grants as we consider additional locations, space, and the potential to reach some of our outlying schools. At this time, new sites are still funded for placement in Title I schools, but we're hoping and we're anticipating that those open up a little bit more to some of our outlying schools where we know these services would be really well valued.
So we're going to pause at the end of each pillar just to keep the questions relevant while they're still here.
Ms. Yoho?
Yeah, sorry, and I was hoping you would do that, because
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, wait till the end and then bring you back up. And just to mention, it took me a long time to know the Judy Centers are named after Steny Hoyer's late wife, Judy. So, anyway, if this is too lengthy a question, pause it and you can send us an email. But if you could just talk about the Maryland Excels and rating and how that plays in with the preschools.
Sure. To receive Blueprint funds for a full-day program, classroom needs to be accredited and an Excel's level 5. Those are both high-quality programming processes. It's a 3-year cycle for accreditation, so we currently have a member on our team that goes out and supports schools. Since the beginning of this school year, have gotten 5 of our schools accredited through their full-day pre-K programs. It looks at teacher training, it looks at the quality of the environment, it looks at the events for families. There's a number of different components, so our schools, we need to continue to get our full-day pre-Ks accredited and go through that Excel's leveling process. Excel's talks more about the childcare side a little bit, that we are bringing in young children and we have adults keeping an eye on them. And as public schools, we traditionally are rated as a level 5 in Excel's, but the accreditation is a lot of work and it's ongoing. Over a 3-year cycle, you have about a year and a half of downtime before the cycle kicks back in. So within the next couple of years, we'll have 70 to 80 classrooms that we are on this accreditation cycle. It is really powerful, though, and it is about self-evaluating and looking at our programs and how can we continue to notch up the quality in those.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Gallagher?
Thank you. So I actually have 2 questions. One question isn't specific to this subcommittee, but in general, just wondering if somebody can speak about the process for determining who serves on subcommittee membership. I think there are a couple subcommittees that don't include any teacher representation. Not this one. There's a teacher on this particular one, and what the time commitment looks like, and just generally how the subcommittees are operating. And then I do have a specific question about early childhood education.
Sure.
As well.
So I will attempt to answer it sort of as I was fortunate to join Frederick County Public Schools on August 1st. This steering committee and the subcommittees had already been established.
Okay.
So in terms of the membership, we work with our association partners. We look at the body of work that the subcommittee is responsible for. We never turn away someone who is willing and wants to contribute, but they were established by looking at what the pillar focused on. And we're always revisiting it. We just had conversations recently about adding some additional perspectives to the pillar, looking at career ladder. So we're constantly revisiting that. And I think the second part of your question was around time commitment. Right, so it sort of ebbs and flows. We met once formally as a steering committee, but the steering committees meet with their committees. We take advantage of electronic interactions and email and updates. Right now, we're in the phase of preparing to complete the implementation plan. And so right now, all of the subcommittees are working, and they've distributed that work differently. So it's not really something I could quantify and say it's X times a month. The blueprint is sort of, we were in a period of waiting, right, to get some direction, so it was quiet for a while, and now it's picking back up.
Thank you. One more question.
Yeah, Ms. Gallagher.
Thank you. Just in terms of, so Dr. Cuppet, you talked a little bit about the creativity around use of facilities for the expansion of pre-K. Can you tell us a little bit more about where those are fitting in and what plans we're making as we might continue expanding our pre-K programs?
So
in terms of
the high school
facility?
model is one where we think we can replicate that as funding comes in and as demand comes in. So when we go to say we need a pre-K here, there's a couple of things that we look at. What's the space? What would it cost to have a space? So for instance, if a school is already at or over capacity, is this a place where portables have to be brought in so that older students can go to portables, and then we can move kids around the building and provide pre-K locations? So we're engaged in those types of conversations. We believe we could also really consider moving around other programs that take a space. So for instance, if this is a real high demand for income eligible students, and it might have a program here that we could move to an adjacent school, and that frees up the location for the kids who want to come to pre-K, then we can do that too. So right now, the 4-year-olds, I think we're going to be okay with. It's when we have to serve 3-year-olds. And that's why when Leslie was mentioning that private-public partnership, we really hope that the private childcare centers will pick up the 3-year-olds. But right now, the state is trying to figure out why they don't have many people raising their hand to do that work yet. And we're actually going to work very closely with one of our early childhood community partners who applied last year but was not successful. And so Leslie and her grants team are going to go provide some technical assistance to, we're used to writing these all the time. It was a relatively new experience for them. And so they're going to work closely to try to because I think they want to apply for multiple sections, which would be huge because we could really start serving those 3-year-olds. So it's an ongoing process.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Mr. J?
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on what you were mentioning just now. I love this. I keep Judy Center in my purview. Keep my Judy Center
Right. Yeah.
manipulative right there so I can keep the babies in mind. I think when we catch them early, it really makes a difference. And so I'm really excited about this. This is my favorite part about Blueprint. Apart from teacher pay, it was about getting to the students early and giving them a great chance to read and success. My question was around the private partnership. And so is it a rolling application, and can parents recommend centers, or is it like they have to apply themselves?
So typically the centers have been applying. There's actually,
Okay.
not only can the centers, so Learning Bee was one that was successful. There could be other centers. I think 2 applied last year and weren't successful. And so those are the ones that we're working with. There's also like a coalition network of in-home providers. And so somebody has developed kind of a overarching organization of people who provide childcare in their homes.
Yeah.
And has basically brought them together to allow them to apply to, say, for instance, they may only serve 3 students, but if they are age eligible and they're serving as a pre-K program, they could get state funding for that. Right now, we're just interested to see what happens as if I remember correctly, Leslie, the amount that the private providers get is going to increase a little bit each year based on their Excels rating. Yeah. So they can grow the amount of money that they receive by by developing the high quality program. So that's part of that factors into all this as well.
So just back to, 'cause I'm asking, like, do they apply themselves, or can they be recommended by a parent?
Well,
They have to-
they would
they
have to apply as an
Okay.
entity, yeah,
And
right.
there's a lot involved with choosing to become a partner around how their staff have to be accredited and
Right.
licensed, and for some, it is a business decision,
Yes, absolutely.
right? Yeah, so,
And
then-
they apply for that grant the same time we apply for our pre-K expansion grant.
Right.
Those are called state pre-K funds. It's typically been in the spring. It's expected to release sometime in December, so we anticipate early January having that. And one of the biggest issues for childcare providers is that they have to pay their teacher in that center commensurate with the public school system.
Okay.
And within 2 years, our salary is going to bump pretty significantly, and
Right.
that's really difficult for a small business. So I'm meeting with the childcare directors group in Frederick County early January to really start, acting as support, technical assistance as much as we can. But that's been one of the really hard parts for this blueprint on our local community.
So you're saying that a provider would have to, if I'm a sole provider, I have to charge the rate to make,
correct.
Okay.
That's what makes it a business decision
Okay.
about whether, right. And
Right.
our child cares in the pandemic were one of the casualties,
yeah,
right? So a lot of child care providers either had to close their doors
right,
or really change their business model.
right.
Yeah.
And then one more question on that, because I can think of centers in the area who have partnered with SCPS before in some other capacities that I wouldn't recommend. And so are you taking feedback from parents who've used these centers? They can apply and say, oh, we're this great place, and they have all the paperwork done. But you
Yeah.
can talk to parents who say, like, my kid wasn't safe there. And so are we looking at that?
So they don't apply to us, they apply to the state of Maryland.
Right.
And we're not involved with any of the approval process. All we're doing is to provide some technical assistance to make sure that they understand the components of the grant, the kind of documentation they would have to put in. But there's no recommendation process from us. The state handles those applications separately.
Okay. And then, based on what you just said, earlier you mentioned before about them training. They train with us, though, right?
So once they're approved under the state, then they have the opportunity to come to our professional learning. So once they're approved, we engage in an MOU with them, and then we can give them access to professional learning as part of that.
And so when I heard that, I thought that they were using our curriculum, and kids are getting the same thing around the county, or no?
So, I mean,
No?
yeah.
Okay.
They have
No,
the
it's
option
fine.
to
Yeah.
choose the same curriculum
Yeah.
if they'd like and use some of their grant funds to purchase that. But what we
don't
have
have
found
to.
to be really beneficial, we run a series of after-school workshops. So those are really easy for them to attend, and we have kind of mixed groups there. We have teachers, we have instructional assistants, so they can attend those and kind of begin building those relationships, but we don't focus necessarily on our content and our curriculum. We would be doing that during school trainings if those were happening, or really just with our teachers.
Thank you very much.
And you said something I wanted to clarify. So if a child gets a spot at the Learning Bee, they have 6.5 hours of free full-day pre-K.
Yes.
So
Okay.
the
State
state
funded,
is
yeah.
paying for that slot for that child within those
Okay.
6.5 hours. It's a really great option for families that are working and need that before and after school care. If you can drop off at one place and your child's not transporting back and forth to a school, they pay for that wraparound care, but otherwise that 6.5 hour day is free for families that qualify.
And then my last question, to follow up to my previous question, as far as accountability and follow-up, then the state's doing that for them then?
Yes, the state monitors those programs just as they do with our
Okay.
grant monitoring. Yep,
Gotcha.
exactly.
Thank you.
Anyone down here? Mr. Rose?
Nobody else, huh?
Okay, we have 4 more pillar, or
We have,
Yes.
we have 4
Well,
more.
okay, I'll be very
Yeah.
quick here.
Yeah.
We're a
I'll
big
try,
pillar,
I'll try,
so
but
it's okay.
you know, we have a lot of work to do in our school system, and I'm going to hold our system accountable as well as my fellow board members. But one of the things I've been most critical about with our system is we don't toot our horn enough. So I'm going to help a little bit. 49 full-day pre-K classrooms already happening. 5 Judy centers, which I believe that also helps with Pillar 4, if I'm not
That it does.
incorrect. 2 programs in high schools, which not only help our pre-K families, but help our high school students.
Yeah.
I think that's fantastic.
Thank you.
So thank you all for the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. So we're
Thank
going to excuse these folks here and bring up our next group. So we have 3 co-chairs for this committee. This particular subcommittee has 2 very big arms of it. And so we're going to focus our presentation on the 2 biggest arms of this work, which is around national board certification and also around the career ladder. Okay.
So this pillar 2 actually focuses on the high quality diverse teachers and leaders. We are actually in the infancy of this pillar. We've kind of got a lot of work to do in a very short period of time. We've been a little disadvantaged due to the implementation of the AIB, as well as some additional definitions that we were waiting to get some guidance on. So with that, I'll let Ms. Canning kind of jump into the national board piece of it.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening. My name is Kristen Canning. I'm one of our elementary instructional directors, and I welcome you all here and welcome you back. Julie's right. This is very exciting work, but we are at the starting line for much of the work that we're doing, and our work really does have potential to have significant impact on many of the parts of the blueprint. So I'm going to focus on national board certification, which is a significant component of the blueprint career ladder, with the goal of increasing the number of teachers who become nationally board certified. In fact, it's one of the largest, or one of the greatest ways teachers can advance up the career ladder that Tim will talk about shortly, is by having your national board certification. So we have work to do in that area as well. Currently, when we started this work back at the beginning of the school year, SCPS had 65 national board certified teachers, which is a very small number when we think about our workforce. 50 teachers are currently receiving the $10,000 salary enhancement that a nationally board certified teacher is granted on our career ladder. That started on July 1st of this school year. We have 7 people that I think we mentioned earlier who resubmitted to the salary enhancement, and our notes say are awaiting approval, but I believe since we started, those folks have been approved, so that's an exciting update. One of the things that stalled our work at the beginning, as we began collaborating with our group, was we had to go through the process of defining what a teacher was, and as it related to national board certification. We negotiated that last year and landed on the definition, I think was shared earlier, that it's a licensed or certified staff member who manages and or supports student growth in a school setting. And then MSDE dictates that that teacher would have to be working 60% of the day with students. So those teachers with their national board certification make up the group that we just mentioned who received the $10,000 salary enhancement. Also, we negotiated last year, knowing there were some teachers who do have their national board certification but do not meet that definition. Currently, when we started this work, those teachers have always received a $2,000 salary enhancement. We increased that from $2,000 to $3,000 this year, and we'll move from $3,000 to $5,000 for next year. All of those monies do come from local funding because we, as a district, are defining how we're going to compensate those teachers who have the national board. We don't get the state support for that funding because they don't meet the state's definition for a teacher. So if we're going to work around our sunburst here, starting at the beginning, we talked about the need to really increase the number of nationally board certified teachers here in Frederick County, and there are significant efforts to that front. Our Office of Organizational Development is leading that charge where most of the professional learning for our system lives, and under Meg Lee's leadership and Amy Struntz, they're leading the national board certification part of the blueprint. So they are supporting teachers both in navigating how to get started with your national board certification, working with them throughout the process, and at a recent beginning of the year meeting, we had over 100 teachers coming in attendance to get information, and we're hopeful most of those teachers will move forward and go through the process to receive their national board certification. We do have an allotment for part-time teachers, so the $10,000 salary enhancement is for a full-time teacher, $5,000 coming from local funds, $5,000 coming from state funds. If you're a part-time teacher, you receive that prorated amount, so if you're teaching part-time, you receive that half of that stipend, still split 50-50. We talked a little bit about the definition for a teacher to be eligible, and so that's the combination of the 60-40 from MSDE and then what we negotiated as our definition here in Frederick County. Those are the teachers, as mentioned before, who are receiving the stipend, it is not a stipend, the salary enhancement. And in the blueprint, there's an additional $7,000 salary enhancement if a nationally board certified teacher works in a low-performing school. So MSDE has defined a low-performing school as one that has a 1 or 2 star rating for 2 years in a row. Here in Frederick County, we don't have schools that meet that definition that MSD has set forth, which is a good thing. And so at this point, all of our teachers receiving the National Board stipend are receiving the $10,000. As we shared before, when you meet the definition of a teacher and are teaching as a nationally board certified teacher, that funding is split. So that goes back to our commitment to honor the $5,000 that we're giving to all of our NBC teachers. The state gives $5,000 to the ones they recognize as teachers, but we'll give the $5,000 to anybody with their NBC and pay that from our funds. So that's our work related to national board. And then Tim gets the fun stuff related to the career ladder.
Okay, thank you. Kristen has already talked about the funding. The one thing with the national board certification we might want to just mention also with funding is that for those individuals who are pursuing, there are fees that are involved with pursuing your national board certification. So MSDE will pay 2/3 of that, and Frederick County will pick up the additional 1/3. She also shared the amount that is paid by MSDE or by the state, the $5,000 for the national board certification, and Frederick County then is responsible for the other $5,000. The exciting part about the career ladder is really looking at how we're going to take our current schedules and then develop it into this wonderful thing that is intended to truly enhance, improve student achievement. And so if we look at the various levels of teachers, and when we start looking at scheduling, Kristen had mentioned a level 3 teacher who holds an NBC. There is a 60-40 split, so 60% of that time is working with students. The other 40% could be collaborating with colleagues, tutoring, professional learning, planning for instruction, those sorts of things. Then you also have a level 4 teacher who would be called or is called the lead teacher, and that would be 50% of that teacher's time would be working directly with students. The other 50% would be mentoring peers and serving as an expert in content and pedagogy. Then moving on up the ladder, you have something called a distinguished teacher. That individual would be recognized. We're not quite sure what that really means. MSDE and AIB, I don't think they have really thought that out so far. But it is someone who has clearly demonstrated incredible accomplishments in the field of education. And so those individuals would be working with staff, but also teaching 20% of the time. On the other side, you have the administrative piece, in which you have an AP, an assistant principal, who either has an APC or holds a national board to teach 20% of their schedule. And as you can imagine, trying to think about all the things that an assistant principal does and how we would work in an additional to teach 20% along with all the duties and responsibilities, certainly a big challenge that we have and the conversations to have with our association partners. Then you also have a licensed principal to move up the next rung to teach 10% of his or her time, and then you also have the distinguished principal. So all of those things make up the composition around the career ladder and talking with our association partners of how we're going to make that work. Also on, as Kristen called it, a starburst, I kind of like that. Next on our starburst, the requirement under Blueprint is the LEAs must increase teacher salaries by 10% within the time periods here. We believe that we are certainly going to make that requirement, and we believe we're about 0.5% away from making that particular goal. The next is the career ladder must be implemented by July 1 of 2024. We have a little bit of time, but again, all of these discussions are in conjunction with our association partners, and we have started that work. As Kristen said, and as Julie said, we feel like we're a little bit out of the starting gate, a bit late, but we are certainly ready to work with our partners and our stakeholders to make sure that we have that career ladder ready and to go. The minimum teaching salary of $60,000 by July 1 of 2026. If we look at the calculations and the salaries that we are now, it'll take about a steady 4% increase each year for us to accomplish that. Negotiations, again, working with our association partners. There are so many various aspects that we need to talk about. What does it mean to be pursuing a master's? How many credits does that take? How long does that take? Is everyone going to opt into the career ladder? Is it going to be some? What's it going to take in order to move across the career ladder and to see those financial incentives? And then the last part, the local maintenance, the local MOU. Here in Frederick, we've been very fortunate with our county supporting us above maintenance of effort. And certainly, we're hoping that will continue.
The one thing I just want to punctuate as you think about the career ladder is the career ladder is really a total philosophical shift on how you design salary scales and advancement. And so the traditional salary scale in most public school systems to date is what we call sort of a longevity scale, right? Regardless of performance, regardless of your credentialing or your advanced learning, you move up a step every year. That's sort of a traditional model. The career ladder layers credentialing on top of it. And so the movement is associated with advancing your learning and your professionalism as a teacher. It's a philosophical change. This is, as you can tell, one of the pillars that is evolving rapidly. And so we often are pivoting around changes and changing definitions or clarifying definitions that we are being provided. And in that way, one of the things that we're waiting for clarity on is the notion of whether or not this is required or optional. So the law basically says that employees could opt into this. Now, as an employer, we could decide collectively with our associations that we want to have one career ladder. And so a condition of employment is that you opt into the career ladder. That's part of working in Frederick County. This is who we are. This is what we believe. So that's something to think about. And it sort of creates the notion that you can maintain advancement in your career and not have to leave the classroom. Whereas I think some traditional models are, you reach a point and then you should become an administrator if you want to advance in your career. And so we want to honor there are multiple paths. They're both important. And then the career ladder places some administrator paths on top of teacher leader paths and sort of equalizes them. And so there's just some of the philosophical pieces. The last piece I would mention is sort of something that Missy Dirks often says as the FCTA president is the career ladder and the work of the blueprint is the floor. It's not the ceiling. And so that will be something that the board will need to consider is around how we want to build the budget and how we want to fund, because it's permissible that we go above the minimum requirements of the blueprint as we look at both salary scales, as we look at salary enhancements, and some of those other things. So
And
Yeah.
if I may add, there is no particular model that the AIB has set forward for a career ladder. So you could have 24 different LEAs having 24 different career ladders. And so you can imagine that will create competition. What we've talked about with our association partners is wanting to make sure that the career ladder is achievable, it's attainable, that it focuses on the true intent of advancing student achievement, but we also want it to be available for someone who wants to come here from Montgomery County, someone who wants to come here from Howard County, that it does not appear to be so convoluted that they can't see a way of moving into our system and then being able to continue to be successful across the career ladder.
And one last point about the career ladder, and I think it's important to state it again. The whole idea of the career ladder and the blueprint in general is to improve the experience of the students in our classrooms. And one of the ways we do that is by encouraging and improving our teachers that are in classrooms. And so as Tim talked about the different levels of the ladder, each of those levels does come with increased compensation. And so as we're thinking about incentivizing teachers to continue to grow professionally and use your skills in the classroom to impact student achievement, this is a way that we incentivize their work and their achievement, but they don't have to step out of the classroom to become a leader in a way that they would want to. They have the opportunities to coach teachers, mentor teachers, and use their skills to ultimately improve our student achievement.
So we'll pause there for questions.
Mr. J.
Thank you.
If this, pardon me, I'd like board members to keep their question to one question
Perfect.
until everyone has a chance to go through. Remember, we still have 3 more pillars.
Absolutely.
Sorry to be the baddie.
Actually, no, it's fine, because I figured I'd get something back, but I wasn't going to let go because the Jewish center is close to my heart, so I was going to dig in there. And that's why I figured I'd spend all my coins on that one. So, yeah.
I'm just the messenger.
For this one, I just have a question about the movement and pay. So with the movement and pay, I want one's clarification, and it's a two-part one question. So what I'm hearing is they get pay, the pay change, because it was a shift for me. I thought it was going to be still longevity and career, or is it just like you can stay?
There's lots of models for that. So remember, none of these are built. What we've been provided is what we call sort of the skeletal framework that has some definitions of what lives in each of the 4 levels.
Okay.
NBC teachers live in level 3. Right? And if you are work in an area where an NBC isn't available, but you have a master's degree, you're in level 3. So they've given us sort of the broad categories. We can add to that locally.
But just to clarify,
Yeah.
so you can still make
Yes.
payment increase with time.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that's still, yes. You don't just stay there forever.
And it's still on pay, same question.
Yeah.
It's actually no question, it's a comment. So I wanted to state publicly again that from the start of this, I see that number as, this is our chance to make a difference. This is our chance to market to teachers. And I'll say this briefly. I want to go beyond that 60,000. That is not, back in the day, STPS would have been like 59.9999999 right there. I want to blow past that. I want to be very, very marketable and very, very competitive with the state. And I want us to be one of the best ones on there. So I'm done.
Mr. Bass.
So I had submitted some of these questions previously, but I wanted to ask in this meeting, do you have research indicating that national board certification is associated with higher quality teaching or stronger student academic performance?
So, as someone who was the National Board Principal of the Year, I want to go on record and say that I support National Board. But I would say that, as with many credentials, National Board reflects an aspect of teaching. The what it requires in order to obtain national board is a deep level of reflection, of examination of practice, of kind of autopsying what you do and analyzing it and talking about all the pedagogical practices that create conditions for students to succeed. And so I think that there is a lot of research, much of which is produced by the National Board Teachers Teaching Standards about the effectiveness of their teachers. But I think it's not necessarily, there are lots of teachers who are just as highly qualified and effective that may choose not to pursue national board. So I don't want to discredit the many hundreds, thousands of teachers who are just as skilled and just as effective that may not have national board. So I'm trying to very diplomatically answer your question, which is to honor the national board, a certificate and all that it represents, but not to suggest that those are, in all cases, the most highly qualified. There are lots of highly qualified teachers in our schools that do not have it. Sorry.
You're right. I like that.
Ms. Yoho?
Comment to the board, Maeve has seen the impact on negotiations and does sessions with regards to blueprint and negotiations, so it's very complicated. Okay, so sort of in the nether reaches of my mind is the idea of, you talked about tutoring, that teachers would spend a part of their day tutoring, and it seems to me there's something about the teacher of record has to work with groups, small groups that need extra help, and that this opens the door maybe for a two-teacher model, something. So it's very kind of in my head, but something like that. Thank you.
So this is around the 60-40 and the definition of a teacher. Yeah, we've discussed that a lot, and we've talked a lot with our association partners about that. I think what's interesting is what the legislation and sort of what the guidance has been, is to look not at the title that someone holds, but to look at the schedule and how they spend their time. And that's important. And so we are not looking to limit that. We're looking to honor the many important things that people do, some of which is directly with touch points with children, and some of which may be more in a more supporting or ancillary role, but is just as important in improving student achievement. So, Kristen, would you say that's a fair?
I would. I think that part of your question really is what some of our big work is, and we have committees working on now. We are really going to have to look carefully at what does that mean for a teacher's day and a student's day if we're on a 60-40 model. A teacher might be directly teaching students 60% of the day, a whole class, but they need to be taught 100% of the day. And so it will impact our staffing, and it will impact the schedules and what they look like. But you're right, like it would be if I'm a first grade teacher and I might teach language arts, language arts and social studies, and then I might have time in the day that I am pulling small groups of students that have additional needs so that we can embed that tutoring within the school day, which research certainly supports as a best practice. But it will impact schedules, it will impact the number of teachers then that we need to assign and allocate for staffing to make certain that we can meet all of those demands.
Did you go yet?
Just one? No, I didn't. Okay.
He hasn't used his coin yet.
Just one. Not on this topic. So I agree. I think you have the most difficult pillar. I would also argue that you have the most important pillar, because without success within this pillar, reaching our goals in the other three would be very difficult. So in that vein, as you talked about, we do all this work to design a career ladder that we hope will be very attractive to teachers. I think it would be very difficult to operate multiple forms of compensation. I mean, I think we've got to buy in here. We've got to, this is it. So in that vein, are you considering in your committees, how are we going to sell this?
We are. So incentivizing staff to come on and join the career ladder is a huge part of what our work is going to have to be. And we are certainly, the career ladder is certainly going to be implemented in a phased-in model over time. I think our biggest considerations are for our veteran teachers now and where are they going to come in on the career ladder. We started by saying we had 60 nationally board certified teachers. So as the career ladder is given to us now as a model, those teachers would not come in on level 3 yet. They would be down in level 2. We've all talked about we have fabulous teachers making a difference every day. We need to honor what they're doing. here in FCPS, we have several unique ways that teachers grow professionally. We have our elite program, we have our Vanguard program, we have our leads, our leadership programs. So that's part of our work too, is to determine what are we going to recognize as potentials for other ways teachers can enter into the career ladder on different levels, and what kind of a phase-in and time model will we look at that's fair, attractive, reasonable, and ultimately gets us to want everybody to be part of it, because it would be foolish not to. That's our goal.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump in and use one of my coins. I haven't asked any questions yet on this, so I get nervous when I see this, because all I see is just dollar signs, dollar signs, dollar signs. And so I would like to have assurance, or what is our plan where we will work with the county, the FCTA, so that we're all like on the same page and people aren't trying to reach for different parts of the pot. So please let me know, how are we in sync? And Leslie, what do you think about all of this?
Here, Leslie, have a
Because everything else is going to cost money. You look at three,
Leslie's
4,
nervous
5
too.
You're nervous too? Okay.
Yes, I see dollar signs too.
Okay.
It is going to be expensive. I mean, that's part of the ramp up of the additional funding that's going to come through our different funding formulas. Our foundation is going to grow each year, those type of things. I will tell you that our new county executive, just this afternoon when I was speaking with her, mentioned that she wanted to get together with us and talk to us about Blueprint. And so she wants to bring Ms. Spiegel in, folks from our board, and to talk about what can we do as a unit and what do we need to do. And so I think those are going to be important conversations that we have over the next several months as we put together the superintendent's budget, the board's requested budget, as to what do we need to put in for FY24. And we also have to look down the road at 25, 26, 27, because a lot of these things are going to be phased in over the next few years. The entire thing, of course, is 10 years. So yes, I do have your same concerns.
Great, okay. Well, and just as we said earlier about the pass-through grant funding for the turf fields and the close relationship with Dr. Lebo and county executive, we need to, I do strongly believe we need that here with all the stakeholders. So that's what I'm looking for. All these are great, but you have to fund it, and it sounds like, I feel like there's unfunded mandates in here, so.
Yeah, so all good legislation has a bit of unfunded mandates, right? But Dr. Dyson and I have had established some regular touch points with Jan Gardner and Janice prior to Jessica being sworn in. We believe that we'll be continuing those touch points as we build a common vision. And we know that, as Leslie shared, we are going to launch that effort together, focus on the blueprint.
And we do have a strong partnership with FCTA in our committee work. They're present in our committee. Missy's there, Jen's there. And so we recognize the importance of having these conversations now and working together now, knowing a lot is going to be hashed out at the negotiations table, but the conversation certainly isn't starting there. That work is well underway, and it's
Thank
very
you.
collaborative.
Okay. Ms. Allen?
Have you taken a temperature check to see whether or not there's a desire for teachers to obtain this certification? I mean, it doesn't sound like there's a large percentage there that have an interest, so.
Well, the interest is growing rapidly, as you would expect with the incentive of the salary enhancement. And so you're absolutely right. In all honesty, when it came out that National Board Certification was going to be what advanced them onto the career ladder, we did not have a lot of teachers. And then it was part of our job, and continues to be our job, to share that message, to make certain that teachers are aware all of your fees are paid for. There's this embedded support through our Office of Organizational Development. And honestly, I think when you look at a $10,000 salary enhancement, that's a big ticket. And so we're going to keep sharing, and we're going to keep working with partners with our Organizational Development Department, and I think it'll continue to grow. I absolutely do. The word is out. People are talking. It's a commitment, and you know what? And it's in place because it should be a commitment, right? You know, we want it to really impact and improve instruction, but we are absolutely going to have adequate supports and continue to share the word so that we can continue to increase.
And the one thing we have not mentioned, and it is important to mention, is these are salary enhancements, and they are pension eligible. And so it does contribute and it does build, and so.
Compounded growth.
Yeah, it's not a
and-
stipend.
And so it's not a stipend, it does add to the
Big
pension
difference
over
for a young
time.
teacher.
We did hold, FCPS did hold an informational session for individuals interested in NBC, obtaining their NBC, and I believe we had around 100 individuals who came to that one particular meeting. So as Kristen said, the growth, there is growth and interest in it, and it will just continue as time moves forward.
I do have
David has another coin.
Everybody went around once?
I think everyone got one.
Everybody's
I
got
think we're
one.
on to the second coin.
Okay, then you did. Now I'm asking
Is that
for
Ben
one.
Corn?
So I'm sorry, we're just having a sidebar here, because we could be here all night. I'm being realistic with this, we still have 3 more pillars. I am not trying to stop conversation. Please,
Yeah.
please,
I can
you know.
send
This is just a brief comment.
We're just discussing maybe whether or not we should like chop this in half and take some more another evening. I'm just tossing it out there. You know, we want to be conscious of your time as
Sure, I
well,
mean,
so-
we're here ready, the team's here ready to answer questions, whatever you'd like us to do. I mean, just something to keep in mind that we are building our implementation plan, so it's helpful for us to hear your feedback.
Feedback, okay.
Because the draft is due from the committees to me and to the team by January 25th. So we,
We're forging on then. Okay, so
Okay.
who's round 2?
So,
I don't want to,
Okay.
Whoops.
These two, we're battling it out.
All right, rock, paper, scissors. Mr. J.
So this is very briefly. So Mr. Allen mentioned people who are willing to do this and where that comes from. As a teacher, formerly FCPS and currently a teacher now, I can tell you that when I worked for FCPS, there was this lack of trust because there were some unfunded certificates. Like if you NBC, if you got it, there was a promise to have a certain amount of funding, and then it said, "Oh, you know what? We're not doing it anymore," and they stopped doing it. So you went from a state had a part, and the county had a part, and the county just stopped doing it. And so, I want to say to teachers, as long as I'm here, I'm going to be fighting that we actually keep our word and we fund this as much as possible. Because I know there's nothing
it's in the contract.
It's something that was in the classroom, in the teachers' lounges before. There was this lack of trust, they're not going to fund it, and people who weren't funded, who I worked with. And so I just wanted to say that that is not lost on me, and that I'm here to make sure that we keep to it. That's all.
Mr. Bass.
Yeah. Could this board decide to enhance teacher salaries in a different manner while staying true to the blueprint? In a different manner than the national board certification?
Say that, can you say that one more time?
So can we as a board decide, yes, we want to enhance teacher salaries and we don't want to tie it directly to national board certification?
No, we can build on top of it, so we can add additional things. So on the level 3, where it says national board and some other, we can add additional credentials. We could say a Vanguard teacher, a teacher, different types of other sort of things, but we can't change we can't change the law.
So I think his question is around, can we pay teachers more outside of that? So
Oh, yes.
outside of this legislation, which we can do.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
We
Yes,
can do.
absolutely.
We can pay teachers more. I do want to make a comment. I know I'm using a chip, but so this legislation aside, I associate myself with Mr. J and Mr. Rose around the great things that happen already in this system. But there are people who don't want to come to this system because there's no pay parity to some of our neighboring systems. And so I'm not just talking about teachers. I'm talking about across the board. I think we're getting there. But if we want to attract and retain, we do have to consider how we increase our scales so that we can compete and then sell all the wonderful things that are happening in this community. It's a beautiful community. The cost of living, when you compare it to our neighboring spots, I mean, most people live here and work in Montgomery County. I'm just going to be honest, right? Because the quality of living and the cost of living is cheaper here, and we don't elevate it. We don't elevate all of the wonderful different things along with opportunities to increase salary. So I look at this as a mandate. The intention is to transform schools, but this is a legislative initiative that, yes, is going to build the quality of our teaching force, our workforce, and I hope make a major difference for our children. But if this never happened, we still have an obligation to pay our staff comparable to other counties. And I am going to push for that as long as I'm on this board.
And you'll have my support.
Thank you. Would you like me to move on to the next pillar, President Johnson? Or?
Are we ready to move to the next pillar?
Yes. All right, thank you, team.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Pillar 3 has two components, 3A and 3B as we like to call them. And so the first component that we're going to talk
Mr. Jay,
about
you've already had stuff close to your heart.
is our CCR, College and Career Readiness. And so I want to introduce Jen Bingham and Deb Gilmartin, who are going to talk to you about their work as co-chairs.
Yes, and as you know, the CCR pillar is all about making sure that we have a world-class school system and we have a curriculum that will help our students to be college and career ready at the end of 10th grade with providing them with post-CCR opportunities and pathways. And as you know, it's high in CTE, which our counterparts will go over that in a little bit.
Good evening, members of the board and Dr. Dyson. My name is Debbie Gilmartin. I am supervisor of system accountability, and as Jen said, I'm sharing the table with her and on the subcommittee for CCR.
Go back one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to thank and acknowledge our large subcommittee. We have a very diverse group, and I also want to draw attention to the fact that Frederick Community College also works with us on the subcommittee, and we have been very busy already trying to dissect the AIB's plans and MSDE's implementation plans. We do have a large committee because we have probably the majority of the questions in the template to respond to. And when you look here, many of these members on the subcommittee are also chairing work groups that are probably just as large as the subcommittee itself. Jen.
So as you heard about, CCR is about making sure that all students are CCR ready at the end of 10th grade. But CCR is not just about high school. It's not just about 10th grade. We're preparing students beginning when they enter our buildings at pre-K, making sure that we're supporting them all the way through. And so our goal is to make sure that we are providing support to all students and we are progress monitoring how they're performing and making sure that we are providing the supports appropriate so that when they do reach 10th grade, they're ready and prepared, not just waiting until high school in order to make that happen. Those support pathways will provide opportunities that could be tutoring during the school day, tutoring outside the school day. We could also have participate in summer programs, as well as interventions and supports that we offer throughout the school day. So there'll be a variety of ways that we could provide these supports, and we're continuing to look at what we currently have and determining where do we need to upgrade so that we'll make sure that all of our students will be CCR at the end of 10th grade. Another big piece that we're waiting on is our metrics for what will be determining how which students are CCR ready. Currently, there's an interim measure where it is based on our MCAP assessment results as well as SAT for math. And currently, MSD has partnered with a research company that's doing the research to find out what will be our additional measures, which we are certainly looking forward to because we know that there are those measures that we have found previously that do indicate that students are CCR, and so we're looking forward to that. That will come out in September. Our post-CCR pathways are all about making sure that they have opportunities to get high-paying jobs, specifically for advanced placement with earning college credits, as well as dual enrollment. And in addition, having our CTE piece, which the other group will be talking about in a few minutes. But one of the big pieces that we're looking at is really increasing our partnership with our Frederick Community College partners and making sure that we have lots of opportunities for our students with dual enrollment. And certainly, as you've probably already heard, we did have the mandate of $1.75 million for paying for our students for dual enrollment. So that was something that we've really worked to make sure that we have. And we anticipate that that will increase because our goal is to have more students accessing our post-CCR pathways. And so we hope and we want to see an increase in that, which will be an increase in funding because we are required to pay for the post-CCR pathway opportunities for our students. So we did a quick overview.
Do you have any specific questions around the CCR body of work?
And the other group will talk about CTE.
Just a small question. Will we, with the growth we're looking to have, will we have to expand to maybe Hood College? Will we kind of burst the seams with SEC? Will we need to move on?
Great question. So students do actually take our dual enrollment through Hood. They'll also take it at Mount St. Mary's. Currently, our partnership is with FCC, but certainly we'll be looking to see it for expansion.
Okay.
I think the cost is more attractive at FCC.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I have
Mr.
a
Rhodes?
quick one, I'm sorry. I have a quick one.
Don't apologize.
Career, college ready, we're talking about college ready. One thing that jumped out at me, and forgive me for my ignorance, but I don't see any teachers on the subcommittee.
Yeah, we actually, on our work groups, we do have teachers, and they're the ones that are really like wrestling with making the decisions and completing the our plan. So they are a part of it, just not on our subcommittee. Great question.
Thank you.
Carry on.
Okay, we're going to, thank you so much.
you.
We're going to have then the second part of this pillar, which is 3B, as we call it, which is career and tech ed. And so we'll have Christine Pearl and Kathleen Chappelle talk to you a little bit about the work of their subcommittee.
Good evening. I'm Kathleen Chappelle. I'm the director for high schools, and very fortunate to be co-leading this portion of Pillar 3 with Dr. Christine Pearl, who's our supervisor for career and technical education. I would first like to do a shout out to our committee group, our subcommittee group, which does include some teacher leaders, some school-based administrators. We have folks from central leadership who are both in the instructional and business sides of the organization, and community partners who are essential to this work, including FCC and our workforce development folks. There are 5 important focus areas for our work, and one that we are spending a good bit of time on currently is conversation with workforce development and FCC to establish a career counseling agreement to provide individualized counseling, career counseling in both middle and high schools, and that begins in the coming school year. Basically, that is to support students as they explore and choose one or more career pathways. That will be coming up in the next school year.
And I'm going to talk about the rest. In relation to career pathways, in anticipation, we have aligned all 43 of our CTE programs of study to culminate in an industry certification and or college credit. So at this point, we are just awaiting the CTE committee to make determinations and provide direction on the new statewide framework for CTE programs of study. In the interim, we are also rebranding our marketing materials to provide a clear pathway option for all students, whether they're planning to go directly to the workforce, to a technical school, or to a 2 or 4 year program. The next area, we have requested funding for all costs associated with industry certifications and fees for CTE programs of study. So we're very excited. These will be part of next year's budget, and CTE will be free for all of our students. So that's very exciting. Strategies, this is probably our greatest challenge, the strategies to meet the 45% of all graduates by 2030 that must graduate with an industry recognition or in a youth apprenticeship program. So we are identifying strategies. We will be, the CTE committee will provide us with benchmarks to reach each year, but we're continuing to expand our youth apprenticeship program. We thank last year's board who funded a position dedicated specifically to work-based learning, and we're also continuing to identify growth for career and technical education programs, which leads me to our last area there. And we do know that we need to expand CTE. We do know we also have facility shortages to do that. So we are exploring a wide range of both long and short-term possibilities or options for physical space so that we can continue to increase CTE opportunities for students.
Any questions about the CTE body of work?
It'll be very brief, surprisingly.
Excuse me, Miss
It
Yo,
will.
I saw her
Oh,
hand first.
I'll do it my way. I'm sorry.
That's fine. The career counseling with workforce development, the Links program jumps into my head, but I don't think it's like their advocate, but can you describe that a little bit more, please?
You want me to take it? Okay, so we are currently working with the workforce development folks, a small committee of folks from our committee, as well as FCC, to determine exactly what does this position look like. We have been having a lot of conversations as well with the AIB and with all of the various meetings that they have had for each of the pillars to try to gain more information and determine. But basically where we are at this point in time is because they need to be able to provide individualized counseling for our students, looking at a position that would be in each of the high schools, as well as, if the funding allows, our middle schools that would focus specifically on career counseling. Not the school counseling that our counselors do, but specifically careers. And this person would really be an expert on all of the options that we offer through FCPS, as well as FCC at both our Monroe Center, as well as our main campus. So that's kind of what we envision at this point in time. Of course, because they would also be working with workforce development, they will be also experts in our local workforce data, where we need positions, what's available. So we really think that this will be a great opportunity for our students.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson.
Oh, thank you. Just wanted to ask, I know this morning, we spoke about this morning, which is why my questions will be brief, because you gave me a lot of information this morning. To my peers, I highly recommend, if you want to know more about this, check out this morning's CNI committee. We had a great drill down on the information here. So I wanted to ask a kind of follow-up question about certification courses that have to be modified by MSDE. Do we have the privilege to recommend courses to them to be reviewed?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, we recently did that with our agriculture program. There was only one option that was available previously for all of our ag programs, and that was the CASE program. And because we have 3 different agriculture programs of study, horticulture, animal science, or we call it pre-vet, as well as ag mechanics, we worked with a number of people to identify several agriculture industry certifications, and we went through a pilot process. We submitted data, and that was recently approved this summer.
Okay, so the workload was on us to present to MSDE.
Yes.
Oh, that's great.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And so just to piggyback on Computer Science Month, we have courses from Google and IBM. They have certificate programs. They will, once you complete it, they will look for you to hire you to work for them. And so I wanted to just put a bug in our ear to kind of submit those courses that are from these certified, conglomerate corporations to MSDE to consider for credentialing.
Well, and once the CTE committee is up and running, they will be making the decisions, and they will be gathering information from different industry partners. So we hope that they will also expand opportunities for industry certifications.
Right. And then, because you said that, can we recommend some of our business partners in the community to
Yes.
with their excellent?
Yes. As you are aware, we have industry program advisory committees and our local advisory council. And yes, I have repeatedly asked
Yay.
some of our local business partners to please volunteer
Yes.
to serve on these committees, because we need representatives from Western Maryland sharing our workforce needs and our industry certifications that are valuable here, as well as throughout the state.
Thank you for the work you're doing in this area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions on this?
Thank you.
I'm going to use one of my questions, and it's more of a comment. With the Livable Frederick Plan, the tremendous investment that's been made in preserving farmland and actually owning and operating a working farm, I know we do have these programs, like limited programs in agriculture, and I will say I'm much more harsher with my words at FCC because we don't really have anything. there. And I'd like to just like throw it out there for the, just everyone to digest. What can we be putting in place to help make sure that these farms that are being preserved are going to have like viable agribusiness opportunities? Because that kind of, that ties everything together. So that's kind of like more bigger picture stuff, but we can't forget the agribusiness component, because it's great to preserve the farmland, but if you can't like maximize your income from that, we're not doing our community justice. So I thank you all for that. We have these 3 programs, but it's just something that's important to me that we're looking at, because we are unique in Frederick County with the amount of land that is in agricultural preservation. What are we doing for helping like brew? Can we start doing, I don't know, microbrew, sort of whatever, what's called viticulture? Because they do all that out in California, and just look at how much Loudoun County has done with all the breweries and wineries, and I know we have them here, and I just don't know who's circling, and can you be visioning on this stuff too? I don't know how it gets implemented, but I just want to throw it out there. That's an important piece.
Well, I would like to share that we do have an agribusiness program at our Career and Tech Center. It is the only agriculture program that FCC has in place because it's a dual enrollment.
Well, I saw that. And
Yes.
are we doing anything with the food trucks? Is that part of that?
Right now, we have apiaries, we have flower production, and really a
Oh, the
student
apiary.
can come in with any type of business that they're interested in developing related to agriculture. They are the regular business classes, but with an agriculture flavor, taught by a certified agriculture teacher.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I'm using an extra chip, sorry. But I know.
Is it a sub-question to the question?
Well, it's related. Please, just indulge me.
I think you're fine.
Okay, well, it's just, there's so many things we could tie together, because if you could put something, like Moo Cow Creamery has a food truck, and like people follow where that food truck's gonna go, so you can get these like grilled cheese sandwiches that just are the comfort for your soul. And seriously, I will go the other end of the county when they're doing their thing, because their food is so good, and it comes from their farm. So having this where you can like acquire a food truck, get it fitted out, go through the business licensing process, like where you can like one-stop shop to get your licensing, not one-stop shop, but where you get your hand held or guided through that whole process, so that you can take product from your agricultural land and then being able to sell it. That's where I'd like to see all that, where, our students are building the food trucks. You're like, this vision is, I'd love to
It's
see.
good to have big dreams, right?
No,
We have to
Okay,
work toward
yeah,
it. It's
there
good, it's
we go.
important.
Okay,
It's important.
so,
Yeah.
I'm done talking. Next.
Thank you for that.
Outstanding.
Okay.
We produce, we produce them. We can
Yeah.
produce
Right, we have to dream it
food
up
trucks,
and make it happen.
Okay.
So I'd let,
Thank
one
you.
pillar to go. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
So hopefully you're starting to get, if you didn't already have, a deep appreciation for the depth and complexity of the blueprint and the work here in FCPS. And so for our last pillar, want to welcome our co-chairs who will introduce themselves and walk you through their work.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Dyson, and congratulations, President Johnson. I want to welcome the new board members as well, and thank you for exhausting your allotment of questions before our pillar. I'm Dana Falls, Director of Student Services.
Hi, I'm Kathy Gull, and I supervise the English Learner Program.
I want to start by pointing out that our pillar really deals with providing more resources to support students of high need. And it's important to note that some of the work connected to this pillar actually began with prior legislation from the Safe to Learn Act of 2018, where we were required to provide or to ensure that students had access to mental health supports when they demonstrated they need it. And that was tied to the Safe to Learn Act, which outlined the behavior threat assessment process. And we began that work a number of years ago. So there are some new enhancements that come with the blueprint around those supports. We have to provide a report that demonstrates that we ensure that all students have some exposure to access to behavioral health programming and supports, where we have to also ensure that our staff receive training and technical assistance around trauma-informed instruction,
and the impacts of violence and the impacts of trauma on our students. And so we've already begun a lot of that work even before the blueprint really began, and we'll get into a little bit more detail as we move forward. It is important to note that our understanding is the next playbook that the Maryland State Department of Education plans to release will be around this pillar. And I know I've seen parts of that already, and there's nothing really shocking that they're going to be releasing in technical assistance.
This is our committee. We actually have 3 co-leaders, Dana Falls, myself, and also Dr. Deveda Coley, who wasn't able to be with us this evening. There's one more committee member who's not listed. You heard from her earlier this evening. Dr. Linda Chambers is also on our committee, so she can lend her special education expertise to our work. So certain Blueprint funding designated in Pillar 4 is earmarked for students receiving English Learner Services, as well as students receiving special education services. It's not school-specific, but it's student-specific. It's to be used system-wide to support all of these students in whichever school they attend. On the other hand, the Concentration of Poverty Grant focuses on funding for specific schools identified as community schools. FCPS hired a supervisor of community schools, Dr. Deveda Coley, one of our co-leaders, to lead the implementation of this really large body of work related to the Concentration of Poverty Grant.
FCPS currently has 4 schools identified as community schools or concentration of poverty schools. That's based on a threshold of poverty rates within our student body in those schools. Those schools are Butterfly Ridge, Hillcrest Elementary, Lincoln Elementary, and Waverly Elementary. For funding for those schools include wraparound supports for students, include engaging parents, include behavioral health, but it also includes funding for physical health. And so we utilize that funding in partnership with the health department so that those schools have a dedicated registered nurse that does, in addition to their health staff allotment for the school, to really provide that wraparound support for not just the student, but also families and family members. And so we have a strong partnership with the health department. We anticipate as the threshold of poverty decreases with the legislation and more schools qualify, we'll continue to advance that partnership in those positions. We did establish back in 2019 our coordinator of mental health, Lynn Davis, who has led the work for our system in regard to the trauma-informed training for our staff, as well as relational strategies for our staff. And she is charged under the legislation to ensure that students who need behavioral health supports, that they have access to it. And so that is an ongoing challenge as we try to work with our community partners. As you know, not just in Frederick County, but across the state and the nation, there really aren't enough mental health providers to meet the needs of students and children.
So we'll open it up to questions from the board.
They don't have any.
We don't have any chips left.
Ye of little faith.
Mr. Day's back there printing more.
Ray hasn't used them.
Okay. Now, in all seriousness, any questions?
Do we have another pillar?
We are going to refer to one more pillar, but it's not one that is, it's more of an explanatory description of the work around Pillar 5.
I'll let you move forward. I'll save my question
Okay.
after that.
Look at you.
I'm a prophet.
You are a prophet. Oh, wait, that's
Way to go, Mr. J.
So I feel like our students in this category, they can benefit the most from our CT, so our prior pillar. And so are we looking at, are we intentionally focusing on connecting Pillar 3 with Pillar 4? Because students in this category, when they graduate, are going to be more in need to have actionable skill sets so they can feed themselves. I'll say it again, I'll say it 1,000 times. I want to make sure that no kid leaves us not being able to eat. And if they can't eat when they leave us, we didn't do our job. And so my heart is for these students that they can, find their strengths, apply their strengths, and be able to bring in income somehow, some way. So are we looking at, I know this is exhaustive what you're doing, and I thank you all for what you're doing. The fact that you got like 4 or 5 different swaths of teams within teams, it's ridiculous. Wow. But are we looking at Pillar 4 and 3 collaboration for those students?
We're actually looking at collaboration with not just Pillar 3, but also other pillars. When we look at the pre-K programming and really trying to make those connections with the needy families within those concentration of poverty schools. So yes, but we're also taking a multi-generational approach as well, and really trying to enhance the skills of parents as well, so that we can help them rise out of poverty if possible. So that's part of the partnerships that are being developed in community schools, is really looking at that wraparound family support.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Thank you both.
I'm sorry,
Mr.
I'm sorry.
I'm
He
sorry.
started it. I'm sorry. I actually, this is just a comment. Having come from the background in which I come, I'm a big fan of wraparound services, obviously, and I just wanted to say I am just thrilled with what's been happening since Dr. Dyson has come on board with those collaborations and the part, whether it's from therapy dogs to after-school programming and the collaborations that Dr. Dyson and your all's teams have accelerated within FCPS, again, tooting our horn, is I am thrilled with the direction that we're going, and I hope we will only continue to accelerate these collaborations and work with these organizations that can provide these valuable services to our students. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And, I'm going to take just a few seconds to toot our horn as well, because our board, since I've been in Frederick County Public Schools, has historically supported behavioral health and mental health supports for our students at the local funding, the cost of local funding. And so we do have a good jump start. We have a ways to go, and we've talked about that in budget enhancement conversations, but our board has been very supportive historically of behavioral health for students.
Thank you. Thank you for that shout out and that recognition. So we're gonna bring it home with some final remarks on the work. And so I turn it back over to my colleague, Mrs. Pellegrino, just to sort of give you a snippet of information about Pillar 5, which is, again, governance accountability, reporting, but also something called the expert review teams that we wanted to make sure you were aware of.
Part of the accountability of the Maryland Blueprint is to have expert review teams come out and look at the school system and say, okay, you created this plan to implement the blueprint, but are you really doing it? And so MSDE was tasked with forming these expert review teams. And back last spring, they put out advertisements for folks to come and volunteer or to apply to be a part of these teams. So a lot of educators within different school systems applied. They went through training over the summer, and they are ready to start their task of going out to schools and looking at the system and how they're implementing the plans. But the plans got delayed a little bit. They were supposed to be started last June. They're now March. So what's happening is these teams are going to actually come out the first year and work at looking at how we spent our COVID money, our ESSER money. And so that's what they're tasked with for the first year. And then once we get the blueprint funds up and going, or the blueprint plans up and going, they then will come and look at our school systems. I will tell you, we have 12 folks from Frederick County Public Schools that have been accepted into the expert review teams. They cannot examine any of our schools, but they will be on teams to look at other school systems within Maryland. They will be given professional leave when they need to go and do these expert reviews, and they will be also paid a stipend through MSDE that's also financed through the blueprint. They're reimbursed also for their mileage and their expenses. So it's a great way to expand their knowledge, and hopefully they'll bring that back to us as to how we can improve our systems and our plans. And so it's a great program that MSDE is working on and creating. So they have not selected any schools for this year that we're aware of, but that we're expecting that to come very soon because they're going to be doing some of the reviews this spring.
So just a couple of final notes. You can see we've selected some important timeline notes. We've talked about many of them. The one I really would like to point you to is the middle of the top row, which is when our local implementation plan is due. We received the template of what that plan should include last week. And in order to back map and get it before you, hopefully at the March 8th board meeting, we will have a draft done with all those wonderful folks that you met today by end of January, so that we can then workshop it internally and make sure that it looks clean and tight and that it's ready to go with excellence. And so just to note, that's due March 15th of 2023. Local plans don't technically require board authorization or signature, but we are good partners together, and so we don't plan to submit anything that you have not reviewed and shared feedback on. What this means for our work, this is just a summary slide of many of the things you heard. This is sort of the priority work that we're pursuing simultaneously and with passion as we get to the next level of work internally. So just wanted you to know kind of these are the most important things that we're working on right now, and you've heard about them this evening. And just want to talk about our engagement with the community. Just because it's a legislative body and and it's a law and it's inflexible in the way that laws can sometimes be, doesn't mean we don't want our community to give us their reactions, their thoughts, their questions. So we're working with our public affairs team to create an accessible feedback tool for students, staff, and families. We're going to come back to the board. Here it says February. We think a more realistic timeline is probably the March 8th board meeting to come back. And just wanted to tell you a little bit more about what that looks like. Our public affairs team is working on a staged rollout. As you can tell from this evening, there's a lot, right? And we don't want to give the community all the pillars at once. So you can see on the right-hand side, the second bullet, we're going to roll out via Find Out First to staff and families, one pillar at a time, starting every 2 weeks, the week of January 16th. And you can see the timeline for that release. It's going to include some animated videos, the one-sheeters that are in board docs that we shared with you as well. All of those materials will be housed on our website and publicly available to help people understand sort of the high level, the what is, what's the pillar include, and what we're working on or what we've achieved, and then what our next level of work is. So we want our community to be well-informed and be able to have a really strong understanding of the importance of this work as it relates to how we fund and support these initiatives. And that is the end.
Mr. Bass.
Yeah, I like the partnership that you're discussing. I have some concerns around the time frame that if you are presenting to the board then on March 8th, if we do have any significant feedback, it's a tight time frame then to implement any significant feedback before turning the plan into the state on March 15th.
So the plan, I appreciate that, and I can understand how it would appear to be that way. The plan is extremely is governed by some very strict criteria for success. So it is not necessarily flexible in terms of what we are even asked to provide them. It's a lot of data tables. It's a lot of just very scripted questions that we have to answer, and so there's not a lot of gray area in describing what we're doing. But we want to assure you that what we submit on March 13th is not in form and final. It's our implementation plan, and there will continue to be opportunities for us to receive your feedback and make refinements to the plan even once it's submitted.
A quick follow-up would simply be, will the board hear more on Blueprint before March 8th?
I'm sure Blueprint will be intertwined in all of the discussions with budget in January and February, because a lot of these components and pieces are going to be in the superintendent's recommended budget. And I will acknowledge that AIB did change the requirement of the plan that we have to submit. It's no longer the 10-year plan. This first submission of March of 23 is really concentrating on the first 2 years. So it is a much more narrow focused submission, and that will help us. But as Dr. Sergo said, it is very prescriptive as to what we have to respond to. And so, yes, we'll be able to tweak and do some things, we think, in that week time frame before we have to submit it. But we don't anticipate that there'll be major strategic changes in it.
And I'm happy to forward on a link to the template itself, which is about 100 pages. And we could share that with you so you can see a sense of what each local education agency is being asked to speak to.
Thank you.
Sure.
Send it. Any questions? Mr. Rose?
Of course.
I believe this is the most, I agree with Dr. Dye. This is a mandate, and I believe it is arguably the most important thing that we will do over the course of our 4 years. I believe this could change education. And I want us to be the best in every pillar, and I appreciate your presentation. In that vein, I will apologize in advance to staff and my fellow board members, as we kind of joke around up here and the things. We meet every 2 weeks, twice a month if that. When we're having substantial conversations of value that are going to benefit our system and our students, I don't care if we're here till midnight, because we have important work to do. Now, if we're not having substantial conversations and not asking valuable questions, I hope people will kick me under the table. But I believe in what this is. I ran on this. I believe the blueprint, and I want us, I think Dr. Dyson so well eloquently said it, we need to be the best in every one of these pillars. So if that means we go until we can't go anymore, then we go. And as I have told many people, you get me for 4 years, and it's going to be a hard 4 years. But I really, really, really I think we have incredible potential, and I love this presentation.
Thank you.
And I agree with Mr. Bass here too. I hope maybe if you see fit that we would get some further updates prior to that March date. I know it will be a big part of our budget process, but I think this is what it's all about, what we've got to accomplish the next 4 years. So thank you, and again, I apologize, but I'm in this for the long haul, and I appreciate you all being here on these evenings. So thank you for this presentation.
You're welcome. And, you know, we live in Blueprint.
Right.
We do a lot of work with it. And certainly I'll defer to President Johnson and Dr. Dyson around the agenda setting work. And we're happy to come back sooner. I think if we want to break that into 2 parts, come back maybe end of February and do a couple pillars, come back at the beginning of March and do another couple, just to honor the stamina and the need to sort of have those in-depth conversations. I think that would be an appropriate thing. I want to honor the committee and the time that it's taken. We have the same concerns, Mr. Bass, about the timeline and what's being asked of districts, and the very short on-ramp to collaborate really meaningfully with our board. So we are sensitive to that, and we do not want to fall short in meeting your expectations. So we're happy to do that. All right.
I'll just, before you leave,
Yes.
I will just add, I'd written this prior to Mr. Rose making his comments, but I just wanted to say, I'm struck by the clarity, the comprehensiveness, the completeness, the informative nature, and the substance of this presentation. In my time on the board, this is the best overall presentation that I've had regarding a topic. So, I mean, it's like we're on a new level. So, thank you. I know that takes a lot of work, and you made it look easy. But I just wanted to say I've received everything you've said very well. So, thank you.
You're very welcome. You're welcome.
And thank your subcommittees.
All right. Thank you to all of them.
Well said.
I did want to, if I could, just remind the board that on February 23rd, 2022, Dr. Loris Phillips and Dr. Alavito did a presentation, and they presented some research on the national board certification. So you might want to go back and read or look at that presentation. It'll answer your question a little more directly.
Yeah, thank you. February 23rd.
February 23rd.